That's
Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent experiences in business.
Learn what their cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Well, hello, cohesive leaders. We are joined today with Walter, the Dutch mentor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Troy and Ben. Glad to be here. And actually, I just recently visited beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. Actually, a lot of times over the last couple of years. The job just ended, so I'm back in New York.
Oh, heck yeah. So you came here for work.
I did. Work and pleasure, but mostly for work reasons. I traveled 2 weeks at a time and
Wow.
the surroundings.
Did you get to see Charleston in all of its seasons, good and bad?
I did, although I tried to hide during the summertime when the heat is out. But yeah, I love to go downtown and go Colonial Park and walk around the lake, Reservoir Lake, or go to Sullivan's Island and walk the beaches. When work allowed, and gave me some time.
If we keep this up, we may have to have the Charleston Metro Chamber hire him.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, Walter, tell us something that's not on your LinkedIn bio or resume, because we want to know a little bit about you outside of the professional world.
Yeah, so interesting. Great question, by the way, because we need to go off the beaten path because there's no straight path from A to Z. I've always had an underlying love for aviation. I'm a certified flight instructor for helicopter and soon to be airplane. And it is something that I have, started and stopped many a times. Not because I didn't want to, but not because I didn't have passion for it, because I had to put 5 kids through college and funds needed to go other places. But finally, I'm at a point in my career that I was able to make another pivot, and I can talk about pivots, in the show at some point. That I now feel that over the next year or so, I would love to open up a little flight school as an independent flight instructor, and really spend more time with aspiring aviators. So that is something I don't necessarily have on my LinkedIn profile, but I feel deeply passionate about. And as I always say, in 15 minutes, you two can be whatever, ... This is something I made for myself a point that if I focused, I studied, I failed along the way, but I picked myself up and motivated myself to get it across the finish line, and I'm almost there.
And so, Walter, have you visited Kitty Hawk, North Carolina?
I have not visited Kitty Hawk, but however, I did go to Aerospace Museum, where they have a very large, setup of the Kitty Hawk. Actually, I posted today on my Instagram and YouTube channel, which I maintain an aviation channel just for fun, called Flight Path Pioneers, about an amazing trip, the 127 feet that it flew on its first journey, which, by the way, is just shy of the wingspan of a 737 or 747, which is amazing. Even more amazing is that, can you just imagine, of all the things that went well and did not go well along the way of aviation, how far we have come in just 125 years? That is, incredibly interesting. And but if they didn't start it, and if the balloon flights long before that, going back to the 1700s, didn't take place, I wonder where we are today. But I'm happy they did.
Yeah, actually, yeah,
Absolutely.
we are happy too. So one of the things that we also like to do is to understand a little bit more about you. And so we kind of take a look at the who you are, as in the I, as you as an individual, as opposed to who you are as the roles you play. So we'd like to know how you would describe yourself using characteristics, or maybe you can imagine that people in a room would describe you when you leave the room. What would they say about you? What would be the words that they would choose to use?
So interesting. I think that if you go back to me as a teenager, I'm a very different person to what I am today. But what I'm being told is when I fill the room physically and emotionally. Meaning physically, I'm 6'5", a little taller than that, 275 pounds. So I take up a space. But people after I leave feel warm. They feel that I'm genuine, that I'm pragmatic, that I'm honest, and I don't use any fluff. And really, that is along the way. I certainly have been told a whole lot of fluff in my career, made false promises. So one thing that I think we owe to ourselves and to those people that we mentor or coach or just inspire, to be honest with them and not give them what they want to hear, but actually tell them what they need to hear, because that serves them much better. So that's really what people would say today. Spin that back to when I was a teenager. I was very much of an introvert. And I was born and raised in the city in Holland. I moved to a small farmer's town where I really did not belong, culturally speaking, and was an outcast in many ways. And early on, always wanted to use my fist to be able to get some prominence or stature. And of course, that doesn't get you very far. And for that reason through all of my struggles, I left Holland and I came to the United States. I wanted to start out with a clean slate. And that's when I landed in a small town called Hancock, New York in 1988. Got off the bus, I threw my cigarettes out and I said, I will never drink again. I'll never smoke again. I want to start fresh. I don't want to be like everybody else. I want to learn who I am as a person. And interesting enough, in 5 miles or 30 minutes later, I met Jimmy, who with his pickup truck chewing tobacco. He told me to shut up, sit down, and he says, "You don't know shit from Shinola, and do as I say, not as I do as I say, not as I do." It's a whoa, that's a warm introduction to the United States. And then they dropped me off campus on the camp to live with 30 guys from England, Ireland, and Scotland, where there was more beer, more pot, more smoking, more old things I just wanted to leave behind. So it took me a little longer to find my true self. And it wasn't until almost a year later, 1989, where somebody told me, I think you have a problem with your attitude, and I think you have a problem with alcohol, and those two things that mix. Come with me. And I went with him to a small church in Binghamton, New York, and he said to me, he says, "Shut up, sit down, relate, don't compare." And that's the last time I had alcohol. And from that point forward, I really dove in deep, into the deep end on following the W12-step program, and really learned a lot about myself and who I was and who I was not. And even, all the years of experience going to today, I still tell people by nature, I'm an introvert, but I've learned to become an extrovert. So I don't get energy from working in a room like an extrovert would do, but I do it because I need it for my work. I need it for, to make progress and to continue to learn. So I cannot deny myself, the continuous growth and opportunity. So that's a long-winded story with lots of holes in between we can fill.
But it gave us a great idea of who you are as a person. And I think that's what makes it relatable, is that you're not afraid to tell the story and to talk about that. So I kind of just summed you up as the gentle giant, of the Dutch mentor program.
It certainly is. And as you can see, I have a gentle giant right next to me who has other planets than me sitting here talking to. So if you see me on screen by any chance, it's just a little Great Dane that's trying to get it.
And I can totally relate to the scenario of introversion and having to work rooms and skills. It's a skill set you've developed, and it paid better than it. I went that route because it paid better than sitting in the room and coding at the time.
Yes,
made those choices. So we learned a lot about who you are inside. Now share about some roles you've had along the way and some hats you've worn, from family to kids to work in different seasons of your life.
Yeah, so let's go back to I think it was 1984. I was 14 years old, riding my bicycle 6 miles to and 6 miles back from school every day. On my way home on an afternoon, I saw an old farmer across the street on a bicycle, of course, in Holland, and he got hit by a car. And I was the first on scene, and I picked him off the roadway. I held him in my lap, and I literally had my hands in his brain matter as he was gasping his last breaths. It was a pivotal moment in my life that I truly changed. I felt completely helpless. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act. I wanted to save his life, but I couldn't. And I made a promise myself after I left that scene covered with blood. I said, "Oh, that will never happen again to me. I'll never feel like that again." And that was really the day that I made a commitment to myself that I wanted to go into clinical medical care. And that's when I learned how to do first aid. I did a bunch of, got CPR certified, and we spent quality time with my local doctor. And I thought I was going to become a doctor. But the struggles I just talked to you about as a teenager continued to rear its ugly head and prevented me from being focused. So I always knew that I had the intellect to do whatever needed to be done. God graced me with a big head, brain matter that actually does work, but you need to put it together. And that's one thing I did not do as a teenager, right? I was really struggling with trying to find my identity, but I knew that healthcare was my route. So when I finally came to America the second time, I came in '87 to visit some family members, and came back in 1988 by myself, barely speaking the language. I landed in New York City, and from there I ended up going to that camp I just described. And I by the end of the camp, I said, "Listen, I'm not going back to where I came from." And it's interesting enough because Alcoholics Anonymous talks about people, places, and things that you need to disrupt in order to really drive change. And I did not know that back then, of course, but I made a decision for myself that I was not leaving. I had a girlfriend who was going to give me a job at the local restaurant. And every time I said to myself, "This is not what I don't want to wait tables. I don't want to attend bar. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. What can I do to relate it to healthcare?" And that's when I ended up, making a decision with a girl together. I was going to get married at 19. I'm going to stay in the United States, and I'm going to pursue medicine, and maybe I go into the Navy. And she was a school teacher, but the Navy couldn't promise me to be in New York, in Connecticut. They said it's very likely in San Diego, and she did not want to go there. So I made a conscious decision, let's not do that. And I became a local EMT at the local fire department instead. And from being an EMT, I said, well, listen, why not become a paramedic? And that's when I became a paramedic, and it was actually one of the first paramedics in the county in upstate New York to be able to provide that level of service. And that was something that, still very proud of that, and was able to make a real impact on a rural community. I mean, an emergency would take us an hour drive to the nearest hospital, and you are it on the back of the ambulance. And sadly, actually, even today, I have a really good friend, Boomer, who's now a CEO of a small hospital. Him and I started off in a humble way as critical care EMTs and paramedic. And sadly, one of his best friends died of an asthma attack. And that was really my first moment that's like, oh my God, this is something that I love doing, but also it has a real, impact on life. Like you start looking at life a little different when somebody in the late 20s, 20 years old, you see that life slipping away. And from that point forward, I have been a clinical care provider as a paramedic, a flight paramedic for the next 30 years. But along the way, as I had 3 kids initially and 2 more after, I had 5 kids altogether, working hard because, making $11 an hour as a medic was the top pay back in the day, right? You can't send kids to college. And I said, listen, I want to have a greater impact. And from there, I came across a wonderful supervisor or manager at that time at Horton who saw something in me. So I think you can become a leader. You can become a supervisor. And he put it in this way. Listen, Walter, instead of taking care of one patient at a time, when you lead a small team of people, now you can take care of hundreds of people. And that kind of really got me thinking. So now I have to think about it, by the time I was 35 years old, and mind you, I've been doing this now for 13, 14 years. I'll never forget, I was sitting in the room at Medic 3 and Rockland Paramedic Service with my best friend and partner, Bernadette. I said, what am I going to do next? I said, I have to pay for college, and I can't continue to work all these hours. And she said, what am I going to go to college? Because I was a high school dropout. I said, I had a GED in the United States. But so at that point, I made a decision. I'm going to go back to school. You're never too old. I'll get my bachelor's in business and economics. Immediately signed up for a master's degree at Loomis School of Business on Wall Street through Pace University. And then years after, I got my fellowship. And it is that pivotal moment. I said, listen, I cannot be the clinical provider, but I can now become the administrator and work my way into a small hospital where I said, listen, I think you're missing something. I fixed the problem for them, and they hired me within 6 months full time, and we started off my career. From there, I went to 3 different organizations, ended up in the C-suite, and really was able to lead thousands of people and about $500-600 million. And that, many things along the way, we probably will get into some of that. I learned lessons, but out of that, I still was the clinical care provider, and I was not completely happy, especially through COVID when I worked for a laboratory company. We worked 24/7 for a year and a half, and I was at a near burnout. And I said, listen, something has to change. And luckily, we made enough money that I was able to say, listen, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go out on my own. I want to share my story with others. I want to work with middle managers who are struggling just like I did, and guide them to a better way of living and higher quality of life. And that's what I do today. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it was really great to talk about the different roles that you played. And I just want to recap. I mean, there was so much information in that last segment to really think through, and we may not be able to digest all of it, but just for the listeners to have an opportunity to recap a little bit that, what worked for you, because, we're working with emerging leaders who are individuals who are looking to make an impact in their business, an impact into their career. And why we do this podcast is so that people can learn from mistakes and mishaps and misunderstandings and all of that along the way. And so we're going to get to yours in a second, but I think what's helpful is to just recall that you had pivotal moments that you took advantage of, and you had a very clear direction in the fact that although you may not have known exactly what you wanted to do, you knew you wanted to make a difference.
And it was an intrinsic connection.
Yeah. Right. And that's what really drives. And so oftentimes when leaders focus too much on an extrinsic sort of motivation, they can't follow through with what they want because they haven't felt it from the inside out. And that's really what I heard from your conversation, was that if I'm a leader and I'm thinking about this, I'm going, well, I'm not going to be a paramedic, and I'm not going to have maybe a roadside experience the way you did, but there will be experiences for me. But what was really helpful is that take my experiences that I have and build it from the inside out. And that's when it'll really make a difference.
Some people might look at, you didn't become a doctor, or they put the goal of being a doctor. They didn't achieve it because of all these things, and now they're a failure. They're mentally, they're not with it, but they didn't align. The actual core reason behind it was, the motivation there was to take care of people, to help people. And that was the driving force, not the end result of the position. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It is self-awareness, right? And I think that Alcoholics Anonymous, when you have to go to your steps, where you have to take a deep inventory of self, really helped open my eyes. And it's not just about drinking or alcohol, drugs, or sex, or whatever else it is. This is something that we all do on a regular basis, to really do kind of a check-in. That's one. The second thing is that surrounding yourself with really good people, and then hopefully find the right coach or mentor or clergy or whoever may be the case to help you through those moments of self-discovery. Somebody who's not willing to just tell you what you want to hear, but somebody actually who's willing to tell you what you need to hear. And that is, being vulnerable. And that's certainly, I learned that early on through the 12-step program, that I needed to do this. And that is something that has helped me, discover things about myself. And one thing I discovered, I'm an imperfect human being, and I've made mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes. It's really how I recover from them that will define me at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a nice little clip there that you sort of capsulized all of that for us. That was really awesome. Great. All right, so now we want to get to you've prepared for this interview. Let's get to the meat of where we are, and this is your experience. And again, this experience is personal to you. It might be about business, but it has to be more of you. And I think because you've led up with this intrinsic value, I feel like we're going to hit a home run here. But what is the experience that meant something to you and your leadership?
Yeah, so I think of all of the moments, I think the one that is most important that I needed to learn is that it doesn't make a difference how smart I am or how good I think I am. You can only be as great as the people around you, and working at the pace that the people around you are willing to work at. And I thought that I could come into any organization and work harder than everybody else, do things for them or to them, only to find out that they would not follow me. And I think that's the moment, that if you want to be a highly effective leader, you need to get people to follow you. And that means at times, depending who you are as a person, you need to slow down. And that's one. And the second thing is that, I learned that the hard way is, doing a project and working with doctors and nurses and administrators, not having the right people around the table, we came up with something that was still believed today was absolutely phenomenal. But once it came time to present and to put it into place, the doctor said, listen, you didn't ask me, and I'm not doing it. So the moment in time, again, is that as a leader, I learned that, listen, you can come up with all kinds of bright ideas, but if you don't have the right people around the table, it's not going to go anywhere. Or the resistance to change will be that much greater. And that is something that I've taken to heart. And those mistakes, I try not to repeat. And of course, to learn that was not the first time. It took me a few times, and people telling me, right, that Walter, you are doing this. You need to change this if you ever want to be successful. And
It's
finally, listening to that.
It's so important to not over-engineer the work that you're doing, to be aware that you can't. Like, if you're leading is exactly that, right? It's inspiring for individuals to want to follow. You can't drag them along. And certainly if you're trying to work circles around them, it doesn't work. So it's really how important it is to be able to say that out loud, to get that.
And I've heard so many times that a good team is better than great players, right? There's, the dream team of football, or the basketball, the redeem team. I actually read an article one time, and you've probably maybe have seen this in the medical world, because it was about a surgeon who was on the top of his game. His team just performed surgeries at a certain speed and all this kind of stuff, and got recruited over another hospital. And it took him 5 years to get back to the speed and the amount of surgeries to get to that level, because he realized then that it wasn't just him. Like, he had his skills, but the team that he was a part of is what actually made that happen, allowed him to make this great salary. But he, without the right hand and left hand nurse and the anesthetician and all the things that he needed, it took them a long time to go back to that.
Listen, there's some golden lessons that I learned, and I still teach that today, or management coach around that. Is that you need to have the right people, the right roles, right? The right skills, knowledge, and abilities, including yourself, to be successful. You have to get your team to be unified around that, right? If you are not unified, it's very rolling a ball uphill, right? The second you let go, we need to learn to measure the things that we do, because if we don't measure it, and then of course there needs to be that cadence of accountability and actions that need to be taken. And once I learned that, initially it was like, just another theory, another didactic, whatever. Let me do it my way. But once that sunk in, that if I did this right, I was able to replicate over and over. And so out of that, really, I learned from my mentor, Mark, two things. A, is that we need to be more in tune with ourselves and listening more carefully to the feedback that we receive. Too often we don't ask for feedback. So I will never forget, I went to a hospital as a senior executive, and being there for like 6 months or so, I did a peer review. I sent an email to all of my peers and said, listen, I'm asking for 360 feedback. And I was literally called into the senior people leader office, and I walked in and says, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean I'm doing? I'm asking the people I lead, the people I work with, on how am I doing? How can I make corrections? She says, why do you care about that? And that is such old style. I said, listen, that is like the most ridiculous thing. You need to continuously learn. And because Mark taught me this, is Walter, if somebody comes up to you and says, Walter, your hair looks funny, tell them to go screw off. But if somebody comes up to me and says the second time, I said, well, Walter, your hair looks funny, I said, oh, whatever. But then the third time somebody comes to you and says, listen, your hair looks funny, Walter better turn around and go to the bathroom and look in the mirror and said, because your hair likely is looking funny. And if you take that piece of advice that he gave me into everything else in life, of finding your differentiating strengths, to help identify your weaknesses, to finding the right things to work on, learning to listen and to affirm that, from the people around you is extremely powerful. And that is something that I've taken to heart. And therefore, I encourage, and I still do, and I will continue to do, and encourage my mentees to frequently do check-ins with their peers. Do a little round robin, and to just double check, see if you're heading in the right direction or not.
So before you learned the lesson of that you can't do everything, that you need a team, what was it costing you? Like what were the stakes that you were playing with?
So somebody put it to me this way when I first started off in the hospital. So working with two paramedics on a patient, my friend and I were in tune, truly synergistic, just exactly what a team can be. No matter what happened to us, we didn't even have to talk to each other. That's how good we were in taking care of patients. We were known as that team. And the way you have good stuff when the cops said, listen, if I get hurt or injured, I want you guys to show up, right? That's the biggest affirmation you ever can get out in the field, or the doctors talk about that. When I became an administrator, because it was a different pool, different types of people, doctors, nurses, administrators, I felt I needed to be the better, the greater person. And somebody said, Walter, it's not okay to step over dead bodies or kill people in order to get to where you want to go. That's not how you want to get there. And it wasn't until somebody told me that and said, listen, that will be a career stopper if you continue to work like that. It is how you work with people. It's how you lead through context and not control. How you can get people to come with you for the ride. And not until that really made a lot of sense to me, and I was able to demonstrate it in the project what I was working on. It's a
good nugget, yeah.
It is something that was extremely valuable. It was a gift that somebody gave to me early on. Prevented me from never getting any further than a manager's position. And I say that to the people today too, is that we want to lead, and I'll use an aviation analogy. You want to be at the leading edge, but two things: you don't want to get the critical angle of the wing to be so high, so great that people cannot keep up with you and they fall behind. That's how you stall, and that's how you will nosedive into the ground and spiral out of control. So it is your job to be innovative, creative, authentic, and find that leading edge, but don't go beyond that. And the best way to do that is to have frequent check-ins to make sure your team is still with you. Frequent check-ins with your peers. And that is something that, I teach forward. Another example, if you have a police officer coming on board and he's all gung-ho and he goes out and writes 25 tickets in a day, he might find that he or she is a hero. The problem is that the other people on the squad will look at him as an outcast. Because if you can do 25 tickets in the shift, now the expectation is that I go do the same thing. So they taught early on, don't overproduce. Don't do anything more than what is the norm for the squad itself. Because if you do, you will end up losing the team. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. Don't work ahead of other people. Bring them along. Lead through context and not control.
It's really great. So I kind of sum up because, we were going to ask you, like, what would be the steps that you took to not do that one again? But you really covered it already in the, just the way you focused on making sure that you don't try to work around people, but you work with people, that you don't have to outwork them, that you can rely on information, you can ask questions, you can gain feedback. I always like to say feedback is a gift unless it's delivered with a sword. So, people being fair in the feedback and then responding to the feedback, creating that two-way communication. I mean, all those things really were very helpful to you. And the fact that you had this level of emotional intelligence that allowed that to happen for you without someone, and although you had mentors who gave you some advice, and like you said, you may have to learn it a couple of times before you did it. The reality is that you did. And so I think that's what it really means to the leaders who are listening to this, is to understand that, you don't have to know everything, but you can ask questions, you can learn, be in a state of learning, being eager to learn. Patrick Lencioni has his ideal team player, and he says that it's hungry, humble, and smart. And when he's talking about hungry, he means that they are willing to learn, that they have an insatiable appetite for knowledge and information. But it's not just acquiring the knowledge, it's actually putting the knowledge to use. because that's where wisdom exists. Wisdom exists in the application of knowledge, not the consumption or the acquisition of it. So really, oh my gosh, what a great little masterclass we had here in doing that.
And so for any of the listeners, I mean, what you've talked about in your progression from understanding you had a goal that motivated you internally, and then also learning the people aspect of it to not step on other people to get there. Now, it could have cost you a lot if you didn't learn that lesson, but it sounds like you incorporated that. You asked for feedback, right? We've had many episodes where we've talked to folks about becoming self-aware, and sometimes that self-awareness doesn't come until someone's willing to be kind to you, right? And that's telling the truth in a way that can be heard, right? And so they have to have that relationship with you. And it sounds like you were humble enough. And what got you to the point where you were humble enough to be able to ask those types of questions for the 360 review and peer review?
Well, a good mentor, Mark really helped me open up my eyes. He saw the raw talent in me, and saw that I was what I was capable of doing, but also saw at the same time that I lacked the self-awareness of how other people around me were, presenting themselves or had their own shortcomings, their own fears, their own insecurities, and that I was not able to connect those pieces. It wasn't until I learned to lead with confident humility, and he brought it forth, that I was able to then really look at it from somebody else's point of view, and understood what their intrinsic values and drivers were, and focusing on that instead of focusing on me. So instead of being inward, which was the normal disposition, to learn to be outward. And outward was really about helping you identify what makes somebody tick. And that means that, from the front line all the way to the C-suite, you need to do that. So actually, interesting enough, he was a Mormon man, and he comes with a different type of a background than where I came from. It really helped kind of drive a lot of conversations. But so one thing that we did together is that we recommended to me, and I recommend this to everybody I work with, to read The 5 Love Languages by Gary Kaplan. It's probably the single most powerful book in communication that's available today. And people say, well, we had work. That's not about, I'm not in a relationship with you. Well, your relationship, what you're trying to form, is really a partnership. And if you want to have a partnership that's highly effective, you need to get to understand what the other person's true needs are. And that is very different from person to person to person. And that is something that I took to heart. So I took the time to love the people that I lead by getting to know them on a much deeper level, a genuine level. And once that took place, I was able to be empathetic, not sympathetic, but empathetic to them, and was able to follow up and ask them how grandma was doing, or how this was, or how that was, or help this person out getting to reach their dreams. That the real genuine connection started taking place. And that's why people started following me as a leader, and as they do today.
So Walter, I know that for myself, we're glad that we have connected, and I'll let Ben speak for himself. But what we would like to know then for our listeners is how would they connect with this gentle giant that has given us such great insight?
Well, a couple things. So I invite everybody to come to, obviously, my LinkedIn profile and just connect with me there. It's always Walter Dusseldorp or the Dutch Mentor. You can find me. There's only one Dusseldorp in the United States, so there's no excuse. Now, if you know how to spell it, you can find me. Or just find me under the Dutch Mentor. You can go to my YouTube page, my Instagram page, and every day I add a little nugget of value to your life. A challenging thought and challenging statements and a little bit of education. You can go to my website, thedutchmentor.com, and you can book a free strategy call if you want to have a conversation with me. But one thing that I did, and I know that you guys are passionate about this too. So there are lots of people who say, I don't have the time and I can't afford to go work with a coach or mentor. So exactly for that reason, I designed an app that is available for a 7-day free trial. And after that, it's $50 a month, because you need to have a little skin in the game, because if it's for nothing, you won't do it. But that app gives you the ability to work 15 minutes a day, not a lesson, not a webinar, not a conference, just little nuggets, including a very good podcast to help support your continuous growth mindset. And it always starts, it's called Smart Performance: Self-Care, Mindful Growth, Adaptive Problem Solving, Rhythmic Operation, building a thriving community around you, and working for against performance indicators. And that gives people a running start. And I still say they ought to seek you out as coaches and mentors or myself. But again, doing it with somebody else will help accelerate you to work towards your dream. And my ethos is to dream big, but you have to act small. You do that 15 minutes a day, there's not a damn thing in the world that you cannot accomplish.
That's great.
Awesome.
So for those who are listening and will not see the visual that we might be posting on YouTube that has it, it's called thedutchmentor.com, and that's DUTCH mentor.com, thedutchmentor.com. That's how you would get in touch with Walter. And so, Walter, we know that, again, in your preparation for this, you thought about all kinds of things that we might ask you. What was a question that you thought we would ask that we didn't?
Listen, I love a conversational podcast, because that's something that we all can relate to that, right? So I think what you did not concentrate on is on accomplishments, but rather focus on the areas that I had to overcome. And I think that's very powerful, because that's where the true lessons in life are. It's not you're not the trophies on the shelf, but it's the journey that got me there.
Yeah, that's really great, which also contributes to the success of your humility. But just for the sake of giggles, what is one accomplishment? What is one thing that you would say that you were proud that you achieved?
I think that the proudest moment is, of course, being a father of 5 wonderful kids. That's first and foremost. That's undeniable. On a professional level, I've been recognized by my professional peer group, the American College of Healthcare Executives, multiple times as an outstanding leader of leaders, and the mentor, or the person who helps other people grow and accelerate in their careers. Because that's a true peer review, right? A lot of the trophies you can go after and just by doing good for you and your team. But having your peers recognize you for the work that you have done is probably the most satisfying of all.
That's great. Really awesome. Well, thank you so much, Walter, for being a part of our podcast program today. We close out all of our Cohesion Culture programs and episodes and training and everything with this simple mantra: you don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.